Welcome back, everybody, to the Vancouver Regional Championships. My name is Maeve O'Rourke. I am joined with Scott Glaza. We are pretty much about to get right into matches, and we have already shown everybody who is at 6-0. So now we get to show you guys a couple of players at 5-1.
Yeah, I think it'll be a lot of fun to check out this match. A really important one, right? You don't want to pick up that second loss. That is a lot of danger.
It's a lot of danger, right? Because if you pick up a second loss now, you and I touched a little bit on this with resistance. If you pick up this loss and then lose again in the final round, it doesn't look too safe for you. Whereas if you win this one and then you're, 7-1 and then you lose your final round, then maybe you feel a little bit more comfortable, But I think for both of these trainers, it is going to be a bit of a grind because both of them are very, very good trainers. One of them is Alberto Lara, our OCIC runner-up to Gavin Michaels. I think he's taken a little bit of inspiration from Gavin on his team. And the other one is Nishant Joshi.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see both of these players. Alberto has been fantastic for what feels like forever now. He's got to be near the top of the list for players I've cast the most games of, where he always seems to go deep. And I'm really excited to see his opponent too. I mean, they've also had a very strong run so far. Haven't got to see them battle before, so I'm always excited for that. I mean, kind of like we were talking about a moment ago, it's nice to see, the mix of the very established players and something that we're probably about to see a lot more of. Yeah,
Nishant is actually someone from my region. I flew out here from about the Boston area, and I know he is from New England area as well. So they have a, it's great to see players from my region that they travel all the way out here. Interesting, now that we see Alberto's team, I want to talk about the change. We talked about how Palafin was a tough fight for Alberto against Gavin's team. Alberto said, yeah, I got it. I'll bring Palafin myself. It's pretty good.
Yeah, if you can't beat him, recruit him, right?
Correct. It's just like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, where you recruit the Pokemon that you beat, or if not. But either way, still running that Corviknight and the Klefki, also still running that Choice Scarf Garchomp. There is a lot of familiarity here with Alberto's team, but there is a lot changed, whereas Nishant is running a Fluttermane, Iron Hands, Palafin, Amoonguss, Arcanine, and Roaring Moon. Truly, if you had an Iron Bundle on that team, that would be probably, I think, the top 6 in usage.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a strategy you can use, right? I mean, they wouldn't be getting used that much if they weren't good, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah, I mean, we call it good stuffs, quote unquote, is kind of a colloquial term that we've thrown around for years and years of Pokemon that are just 6 Pokemon, you put them together, they're all solid individually. Like it's nothing, none of them feel like a weird niche pick. They're just solid.
Yeah, though I'm a little disappointed in the players. I really feel like that someone using Great Tusk should have started calling it Great Stuffs. I feel like it was just too free. Come on, guys.
I mean, Joe called it Average Tusk in Orlando, and then he was proven incredibly wrong by that. So, I mean, I was also proven pretty wrong. I think Great Tusk has kind of really shown up, and this is one of the first matches of my casting for today with you and I without Great Tusk in it, and it is a couple of different Pokemon here, and we've seen how Alberto has piloted Klefki, and Klefki, I think, with Palafin is a really neat combination because having screens with Palafin probably feels really, really nice.
Yeah, I'm pretty interested to see this. I don't know that I've seen kind of this combination of Pokemon in a streamed match so far in this format. And yeah, I mean, I think Palafin tends to be annoying enough to remove as it is, where its stats are like just high enough that they can often frustratingly survive the tiny bit of HP, and that much more likely to do that in this team. Several of the other Pokemon on the team also like very powerful with screen support, as we saw with them nearly taking the Oceania International Championships together. The other side of the field, we see a more conventional version of the Palafin team, but I'm pretty interested to see how these teams will interact. I think both sides will have a lot of options. This one could really go either way.
Yeah, I mean, the Tailwind users on both teams, right? For Alberto, the Tailwind is on Corviknight, whereas it is on Nishant's Roaring Moon. However, the leads here from this trainer, Klefki and Corviknight, I could have put a lot of money on that one, where it is Arcanine and Iron Hands. Intimidate into that Mirror Armor is just going to reflect that Intimidate right back onto the Arcanine.
Yeah, one of Corviknight's cool tricks. We didn't see it the last time that Corviknight was in the stream. For players who did watch that match, by the way, with Len, I was actually talking to him yesterday about how I thought if players played against these two consecutively, they might be tricked by it because it's very different teams, even though it's similar Pokemon.
Yeah, Klefki is going to get faked out this turn, though, unable to move. Arcanine going for a Will-O-Wisp right out of the gate, just trying to slow down this Corviknight. Corviknight loves to go for things like Body Press, and so if you can stop that and prevent Roost from fully healing, you're in a great spot. This Brave Bird as well into the Arcanine does way less damage than I'm sure Alberto would have liked, and now, that burn starts to become a little bit more problematic.
Yeah, I think that we're likely going to see a slow start to this one. Relatively defensive Pokemon out in the field. This Corviknight does know Roost and is not afraid to use it, as we have seen in the past. So, the burn going to slowly whittle away the health, asterisk.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, too, right now, Klefki can move. It can start clicking some moves like Reflect in front of these two big physical attackers. If it wants to click Light Screen later on, it has that opportunity. Flare Blitz from the Arcanine into the Klefki. Man, those screens are really, really nice, huh? And it just shows how much Alberto loves to use them. And that is, it just helps to start setup. And Alberto is truly a player that I think loves to click these tech moves. Tailwind from the Corviknight. Wow, Wild Charge into that Klefki, still able to hang on pretty comfortably and now start taking some recoil.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of a weird element of these two Pokemon that feel. I mean, at least Iron Hands can heal itself back up with Drain Punch potentially, but the Pokemon have done a little more damage to themselves than Alberto's Pokemon have done to them.
I mean, you win by doing the most damage in theory, but it doesn't matter who you're doing that damage to. No, Arcanine going for Protect this turn. Klefki clicking Light Screen. It holds that Light Clay, so these screen turns last incredibly long. Corviknight, Brave Bird down into that protected Arcanine means not going to get any damage off once again on Alberto's side of the field. Wild Charge from the Iron Hands targeting down into the Corviknight. It's not enough to get that knockout either, and you're still taking more recoil. So hey, like you said, you're still at least getting a little damage off on the other side.
Yeah, whittling it down slowly, although Corviknight going to heal back up a little bit with that Citrus Berry.
Yeah, it's one of those Pokemon, right? I'm sure Corviknight would love to not be burnt right now because there's a lot that I'm sure it would really like to do. But now Klefki has kind of done the setup that it needs to do, right? It's all it has for an offensive move is Dazzling Gleam. It can just start clicking Dazzling Gleam and do little bits of chip damage. Corviknight can just click Roost, restore its HP. Dazzling Gleam, we'll have to see how much this does. Yeah, that's about as much as I expected, right?
I wonder if Iron Hands will call that, though, and use the Drain Punch.
Yeah, absolutely. Arcanine Flare Blitzing, though, into the Klefki is enough to get that knockout. So, at that point, you don't have to worry too much about clicking Drain Punch, but I think Klefki did exactly what it needed to do, which is prep for the Pokemon in the back for Alberto.
So, yeah, it's got the setup. You don't want to have these Pokemon who kind of aren't doing any damage out in the field too long. And it is just the Wild Charge. No Drain Punch this turn. Corviknight taking that hit like a champ.
I mean, this Corviknight is gonna be a problem. It doesn't matter if you cannot intimidate it. If you send Pokemon out to do damage, sure, it can roost back up. The burn does hinder its offensive output, but Roaring Moon here with this booster energy is gonna provide a lot of offensive output with that attack being heightened. Yeah,
kind of no more games now, right? I mean, still sort of a weird spot for Alberto where, the Corviknight is out there kind of hanging out, not really doing a whole lot. There's still that Intimidate on the Arcanine from itself. But not a whole lot happening here, and Alberto's probably going to switch around here, not going to get a whole lot out of his Tailwind.
Yeah, Volcarona is going to be the Pokemon that comes in. Arcanine also going to be switching out here for Nishant, is instead going to be bringing out their own Roaring Moon. This Roaring Moon, though, I believe, also holding that booster energy. So if it is the attack booster energy, which it actually does not look like, it looks like the speed booster energy here. Really interesting now that Nishant may be moving faster once this Tailwind has ended. Protect as well from the Roaring Moon on Alberto's side. Iron Hands going for a close combat into that Protect. Neither of these trainers have really committed to Terastallization now either. I think it's really kind of baiting each other out a little bit at this point.
Still, I mean, this is a pretty significant lead on Nishant's side, right? Where the speed difference is a big swing here too, right? It kind of like forces a Terra almost, where these Pokemon are reasonably good at dealing damage to themselves. So, and then yeah, I mean, there's a Pokemon knocked out on that side. At least our screen's up for now, but that's a very ineffective Tailwind so far.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't have a lot of opportunity to really set up another one, but Volcarona switching out for this Corviknight means you do at least have another chance. The Roaring Moon on the opposite side of the field, though, also has Tailwind. Iron Hand's going to switch out for Nishant. Instead, going to bring back in that Arcanine. Once again, you're still going to have that Intimidate bounce back thanks to that Mirror Armor, which is still pretty nice, at least, because you're preventing that Flare Blitz from doing as much damage as it maybe wants to do. Finally, a Terastallization here will be coming out on this turn. It is going to be on that Roaring Moon on Nishant's side. It is going to be the Terra Flying type, which we've seen quite a lot. It boosts the power of that Acrobatics, which is a move almost every single Roaring Moon carries because it is just so effective and so powerful. Looks like Alberto also is going to be matching that.
Yeah, we will see. Kind of had a lot of awkward matches like this between mostly Dragon types, it seems like, where they both just scare each other off the field so much that they have little choice. Even in this case where both sides are pretending that they're flying in Dark-type Pokemon.
Acrobatics from the Roaring Moon on Nishant's side into that Corviknight. Man, that really does not do a lot of damage there. Acrobatics from the Roaring Moon on Alberto's side is going to be going into the Roaring Moon on Nishant's, and that actually does a lot of damage. That's a 2-hit knockout.
Yeah, much better. So Alberto finally getting his first big swing of damage, and he's still right back in this one. The speed disadvantage is unfortunate, but it's very unlikely the Roaring Moon on the opposing side as it feels going to be able to knock his out. I'd say the one flaw in this is that you kind of have to knock out the Arcanine and don't want to just eat another burn for nothing. Corviknight's been doing a great job of surviving on the field, but because of that burn, not inflicting a whole lot of damage. So unless he wants to leave all of the future damage to Volcarona, is sort of important to protect Roaring Moon here.
Yeah, I think Corviknight, because it's not doing a ton of offensive output, Nishant's been somewhat ignoring it on the field, which definitely makes a lot of sense, but you can't ignore it forever, because at some point it can just become truly, it can become a little bit bothersome, even with that burn. But Tailwind from the Roaring Moon on Nishant's side, just to try and keep the Pokemon on their side of the field a little bit faster. Arcanine going for a Will-O-Wisp as well, going to be moving first, thanks to that Tailwind into the Roaring Moon on Alberto's side. Alberto's Roaring Moon, though, still should be able to pick up a knockout if it goes for an Acrobatics into the opposing Roaring Moon, because we saw how much damage that did, but instead into the Arcanine, it does not do enough damage to even bring it into the red. Corviknight just going to roost once again.
So that's a tough turn for Alberto, where it's like it's sort of a closed team sheet feeling turn, where you're a little surprising. One Roaring Moon is Tailwind, the other one is Dragon Dance instead, as we saw in Oceania. Yeah, I mean, it's the most obvious move on the other side of the field, right? Where getting that burn is huge now. Turn 2 burn Pokemon, 0 knockouts so far for Alberto. It makes it really tough for new damage. Right now, really all that his opponent needs to do is just kind of maneuver in such a way that Volcarona can never, get in for free and start taking some free shots. So, kind of surprising. We might have an upset in game 1.
I mean, something that could be interesting, right, is Alberto has at least done a good job of chipping away at damage to try and take a double knockout, but you're still going to be taking damage first because of that Tailwind. Nishant's Roaring Moon into the Roaring Moon on Alberto's side brings it down to under half with an Acrobatics. Flare Blitz from the Arcanine into the Roaring Moon. Not enough to knock it out here, not even enough to bring it into the red, but it does add some recoil damage. Does mean that this Acrobatics here from the Roaring Moon should be enough, but it actually targets into the Roaring Moon on Nishant's side. But yeah, still enough there to get that knockout, thanks to just how much damage had been slowly chipped. And Alberto may be able to take a double knockout here if they went for that body press into the Arcanine, but instead that Tailwind is the move that matched, and I actually don't mind that either, because you're not allowing 2 Pokemon to come in for free.
Yeah, I kind of like it. It's like the Arcanine's still just as pinned as it was before, right? I mean, Pokemon are both burned already anyway, so kind of who cares? Plus, the Arcanine's intimidated, so it's really not providing a whole lot of threat in the field. And then, yeah, I mean, not only you get to match the Tailwind, but now that, Alberto's Tailwind's going to last a little bit longer, so it will eventually provide some small advantage that could make a big difference in how this match plays out. I think one other thing to point out there is, the speed advantage of the Roaring Moon on one side of the field felt like a big deal, but you really see the difference in damage.
Yeah.
The Acrobatics from Alberto's side doing so much more damage.
Arcanine has to switch out here this turn, sending in the Flutter Mane as Nishant's final Pokemon, which probably doesn't feel awesome to have in front of this Dragonite, who can go for something like a Throat Chop. Roaring Moon, though, is just going to protect in the face of a Fake Out. Cannot protect on this Corviknight as it's not running Protect, but you could still go for a couple of big moves here. Brave Bird and Roost are both Brave Bird Body Press, but Brave Bird into the Flutter Mane just does a little bit of damage. You take some recoil here as well, but at that point you're at least starting to get some damage down, and it is not a Focus Sash, so you're not too worried about trying to just chip and whittle away at it. Yeah,
I mean, a whelming amount of damage for sure, and we do finally start to see these screens expiring, but hey, every little bit counts. At least
weren't you talking about a 15-turn game being a real game of Pokemon?
Yeah, this is what I like to see. This is why I'm a big fan of Alberto.
Yeah.
But I mean, I still think he's in a tough spot here. Nishant has played this game very wisely, where he's not really given anything easy. Now we've got this period where, in theory, Alberto's side could have an advantage with the Tailwinds being, staggered awkwardly, but with the burns, it's not very long to take advantage of it before these Pokemon are simply going to faint.
Yeah, I mean, this Corviknight may just be able to stick on the field. Roaring Moon has, it is burnt. You don't have any double targeting moves, which would be really nice to have in the face of a Flutter Mane that can also go possibly for a double targeting move with Dazzling Gleam, depending on what they want to lock into this turn. Shadow Ball or Power Gem may feel safer. It looks like Shadow Ball is the move of choice down onto that Corviknight. Still does a pretty good chunk of damage, probably just the same amount as a Roost would do, but Acrobatics into the Iron Hands once again you're saying a whelming amount of damage. I think that's a pretty accurate description. Brave Bird from the Corviknight into the Fluttermane does bring it down to under 50%, but Wild Charge from this Iron Hands is enough to finish off the Corviknight, and I think that was Nishant's biggest hurdle.
I thought that was a big deal. I was a little concerned there. I was about to eat my words, making fun of the Corviknight a little, where I think we were very close to the point where he played for it with his food too long, and the Corviknight was going to get carried away and not be able to get knocked out. But now, yeah, I mean, we're one turn from this Roaring Moon fainting, and Volcarona's got a lot of work to clean up.
I mean, Volcarona does have access to Quiver Dance, right? It can get the boost that it needs, especially to special defense in the face of that Fluttermane, but you still have two big physical attackers on the opposite side of the field in Iron Hands and Arcanine, and especially, you know, that Arcanine itself, it can be a little bit problematic. It has Snarl, which is huge, especially you could probably Snarl your way into an endgame here for Nishant.
Yeah, I mean, critically resist both of Volcarona's attacks. I think another thing to keep in mind here is that his Flamethrower is the fire type attack, not Heat Wave. This is one situation where getting a single Quiver Dance and then just clicking Heat Wave a bunch would look pretty good, except it's not an option.
Yeah, the Fluttermane gonna switch out here for the Arcanine. Arcanine finally has an Intimidate that can stick because there is no Mirror Armor, can finally come in without worrying too much about it. Roaring Moon's the only Pokemon that's really gonna be bothered by it, but this Acrobatics with that Intimidate, it may just be enough, but no, it targeted down into the Arcanine instead, does get that knockout. Means the Fluttermane can come back in though, and can reset its move that it was choice locked into. Volcarona gonna get a Quiver Dance up. First thing here, boost that special attack, that special defense, and that speed. It's such a strong move and one of the main reasons the players use Volcarona, but Wild Charge from the Iron Hands down into the Volcarona, man, that is a two-hit knockout there, and that definitely, I think, seals this up a little bit more for Joshi as the Roaring Moon will get knocked out from burn damage this turn.
This is still going to be a pretty tight finish, though.
It's close.
Yeah, Volcarona should be able to easily knock out both of the remaining Pokemon in one shot each, but since it can't do it in one turn, you know, one big hit from either of them, critical hit in particular, would probably finish this one. It is worth keeping in mind the non-fire move is Giga Drain. Those tiny extra hit points, if Giga Drain can knock out one of these Pokemon, could make a big difference.
Yeah, Fluttermane coming back in. Tailwind also just ended as well. Not that I think it mattered terribly much because of that Quiver Dance boost. This is where things get a little dicey. I like the lock into protect here. You get to at least test what that Fluttermane is going to go for with the choice specs. Just see exactly what it's prioritizing its damage to be. Power Gem is the move. Makes so much sense here. 4 times super effective, which is really, really great. And means at that point too, you're not worrying any sort of accuracy, even though there really isn't a worry there. But Wild Charge also, you saw how much damage that did. Nishant's going pretty hardcore with damage right now.
Yeah, and again, you know, this tiny bit of leftovers healing could make a difference, right? You know, maybe a Giga Drain knockout here, and suddenly this Volcarona's decently healthy.
Yeah.
You know, Alberto's like really in the back foot all game, but I don't know.
It's not over till it's over.
Yeah, because I mean, if it does survive too, I mean, I guess surviving will probably be enough here. I think if we see Volcarona still on the field at the end of his term, this is an Alberto dub, but you know, he gets another free leftovers tick either way if he does.
Yeah, I think if he takes out the Fluttermane with a Giga Drain, then he's probably in a better position and maybe deal with the Iron Hands second because of the fact that you'll get more HP back from a Giga Drain into the Fluttermane than you would from into the Iron Hands, and then you don't have to deal with the Power Gem because Power Gem's probably the biggest hurdle right now, and I think that's kind of just, Alberto's kind of in this weird position. You know that Fluttermane cannot protect. Giga Drain goes in first. It's not enough to get the knockout though here, and I think that might be a little bit more problematic. You still get a good amount of HP back though. You are going to take a Power Gem from Fluttermane, and if this is enough to knock out, then that will seal the game, and it is, and Nishant takes game 1.
Yeah, fantastic game there. I mean, Alberto was close.
He was close.
Yeah, I mean, a critical hit there would flip that one, which, you know, I mean, not great odds, but I mean, considering how on the back foot he felt like the whole game, I mean, it was close the whole time, right? Where I think that whole game was kind of just a battle of resources where, you know, both sides knew kind of how the one was going to end up, but just a matter of being a good enough position once they got to the true end game with Volcarona entering the field there. And Nishant was great. You know, they preserved just enough resources, able to close that one out. And I think a really interesting game 1.
I'm just looking into adjustments for game 2, right? I think Nishant had a really good game plan moving forward. There's probably a lot of practice from them into Alberto's OCIC team, just because you've seen that kind of moving around pretty often now. Even if you don't see all of the same 6, you see the Corviknight Klefki running around on that in-game battle stadium, and that can be pretty problematic to deal with if you don't have a game plan. But maybe Alberto switches it up. Maybe, you know, you prioritize speed a little bit more. Maybe Garchomp feels a little safer with a Terastallization with Terra Ground, and your Choice Scarf could get some some big Earthquakes off if you pair it with your Corviknight. I think there's a lot of opportunity maybe for that to be a nice spring, especially because we did not see Palafin that game.
Yeah, I mean, Palafin's another thing to keep in mind for both players. I feel like, they're kind of struggling to trade damage a little bit. I think bringing Palafin would be a reasonable move for both sides. It's a little scary on Nishant's end, I think, because if you let Volcarona get a Quiver Dance, you suddenly just have a lot of HP to give it with Giga Train.
Yeah.
But I do think that either side can consider it. I think it was... it's another game, too, where I think even if both sides brought all 4 of the same Pokemon, a lot of different things could happen. But I think I think I switch it up if I'm Alberto. I think the 2 things I don't like about that game are, like, there weren't a whole lot of options to avoid getting the whole team burned. His Lumberry is on that Palafin that we never saw. And also, like, he did a great job of controlling the Arcanine's damage output by always matching the Mirror Armor and reflecting the Intimidate. But the fact he was able to do that every time and still didn't win the game kind of leads me to believe that, like, well, I don't know how much how much gap you can get versus how you played game 1, right? It wasn't really a gameplay problem, so I feel like it might be a time to see some different Pokemon.
Arcanine and Iron Hands is the lead for Nishant, and Alberto brings out Klefki and Palafin. This is exactly what I wanted to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of excited to see this too, right? Where it's like, all right, the game plan didn't work perfectly the first time. Let's see what we can do. Well, last time we did see the fake out coming in onto the Klefki to try to stop those screens from coming immediately. We'll have to see if that's what happens this time or not. But I feel like if you're Alberto, there's a lot of temptation to get a little sneaky here. Like, can you get a cheap attack off into that Arcanine maybe? Yeah,
Klefki switching out here, especially if there was a fake out targeted down into there. Roaring Moon going to switch in its place. No screens on turn 1, which does feel pretty counterintuitive to the way a lot of players run Klefki, but this booster energy with Photosynthesis does do a lot with that acrobatics. We saw Arcanine's Will-O-Wisp targets right down into the Palafin. No protect there either, also meaning no fake out. Wonder if there was just a big wild charge targeting down into that Palafin. Not actually that Lumberry now getting broken thanks to getting that Will-O-Wisp off first. Flip turn into the Arcanine does still do a good chunk of damage. I would have been, it'd be interesting to see if that was possibly the Mystic Water, Terra Water set, how much damage that would have done. I know there are a lot of Palafin Zero believers here.
I kind of like it. It's a 0, but it actually made a pretty big play there. Klefki switching in and out on the same turn because he used flip turn instead of switching.
Yeah, Klefki does take that big wild charge damage, though, brings it down to under half. So at least, with Prankster, you can get those screens up early.
Yeah, I think that was really cute. So for once, though, also Roaring Moon able to get in the field without being intimidated. Cycling this Arcanine would take a lot of resources, and now it's threatening a ton of damage in the Arcanine slot. Klefki somewhat safely should be able to get screens up here as long as it does reflect first. I really like that's the play by Alberto. It's very cute. It's a somewhat unconventional use of flip turn, but as long as he can keep that Palafin in a situation where he doesn't need the Lumberry anyway, he didn't pay anything for that, and was able to get some free damage too.
Yeah, I mean, that Palafin running flip turn you don't always see because a lot of players have opted for Haze, which is a really, which is a huge boon for those open team sheets, right? Arcanine, though, is just going to hard switch out here, bring in Nishant's own Roaring Moon. We saw how much damage one Roaring Moon acrobatics into another did, especially already with a burn, and that is really interesting, I think, to note, because even though it is faster, it's not going to be able to move until next turn. Alberto gets to terrastalize this Roaring Moon first to get that boost to that flying type acrobatics as well, and just begin to put on some major damage this turn. And Nishant, if they want to not take even, it would be neutral damage from an acrobatics into their Iron Hands, they'd have to switch it, because if they terrastalize, it's going to be super effective because of grass. Reflect, though, from the Klefki stops some of these big physical moves from doing as much damage. Acrobatics from the Roaring Moon committed down onto the Roaring Moon on Nishant's side. That's enough for the one-hit knockout, definitely showing how big it is to not have burns right out of the gate.
Yeah, wow, really seeing the power of the more offensive Roaring Moon, but get Wild Charge coming the other way.
Oh, it is not enough to get that knockout. That is what Reflect is for.
Yeah, well, Klefki, for a Pokemon that's mostly just gotten beat up so far this series, really making a big play there. Getting another swing with that Roaring Moon is a big deal. I don't know if he'll go for it right now or later in the game, but, that was huge. We saw previously how difficult it was for Alberto to get that damage out, and he's got some opportunities now, right? He can swing one more time with Roaring Moon probably, and then still has that Palafin in the back, unburned, and likely quicker than the Pokemon that are remaining on the other side of the field.
Yeah, I think Alberto really is just trying to time when he gets a free switch in with a knockout, going for a Protect this turn with Roaring Moon, also matching a Protect from that Arcanine on the opposite side. Light Screen from the Klefki on Alberto's side. That is going to last, that full 8 turns. It's going to last a long time, especially if the Fluttermane's in the back. Wild Charge targeted down once again into that Roaring Moon, not going to connect through Protect.
That's a big deal. I mean, now potentially the option is to get some damage, start wearing that Arcanine down. And things are looking very different than last game.
Yeah, Roaring Moon once again just keeps clicking acrobatics. This thing moves strong and fast. It's not enough to get the knockout though this turn. That Intimidate definitely helping out here. Flare Blitz into the Klefki does get the knockout. I don't think you're too worried if you're Alberto. You may actually get a double switch in here if Nishant actually went for that double knockout by clicking Wild Charge once again. Arcanine does get knocked out as well though, so this does mean that Nishant is down to their final 2 Pokemon as well. So it will be a 2v2, but if you're Alberto, you're hoping that it's that Flutter Mane in the back.
Absolutely, and he does get those streams when he switches back in, which should, given the state of the game, last for the remainder of the game this time. I think that was one thing that hurt Alberto last time. The game was so slow that we wound up not seeing the screens rather at the end. And now there are 2 big threats on Alberto's side. You have the Volcarona, who you can't really ignore, is going to get crazy and just sweep the game, and Palafin, who's crazy right now. It's become the hero.
I mean, there is no fake out left. You cannot fake out because Nishant never swapped in that Iron Hands in and out. You have a really comfortable Jet Punch into a lot of things. You can go for Terra Water right now and already have a boost to those moves. However, you could also go for Terra Grass, and that would stop the super effective damage from that Flutter Mane with a Power Gem, which may feel like an even safer option for Alberto, depending on where they see their end game to be. Looks like the Iron Hands is going to terrastalize into that Terra Grass, though. Will at least not take neutral damage from that Palafin, possibly, if it went for something there. But it does put it at risk of something like a Flamethrower from Volcarona, but Volcarona just going to protect this turn, not going to set up a Quiver Dance, allows to see what this Flutter Mane locks into, and seeing that it's the Power Gem does allow for Alberto to maybe make a decision on what they want to terrastalize in the next turn. Palafin going for Wave Crash into the Flutter Mane does do enough actually for a one-hit knockout, so now I think you've got a pretty good, comfortable option here with Volcarona.
Yeah, I think that looks bad. The now grass type Iron Hand's not going to enjoy facing down this fire type Pokemon, especially because it does not pick up the hit on the knockout on Palafin. As much as a Pokemon with only water type attacks isn't super threatening to Iron Hands, it's going to take another turn of attacking that Palafin. I think this is just way too big of a lead now. Yeah,
I think you have the opportunity to still click Jet Punch. You can click Flamethrower. You can click Quiver Dance if you want to be safer about it, because you know that there's probably nothing this Iron Hands can do to do enough damage to hit in one hit. Flamethrower though, not actually enough to knock out here. Looks like Palafin did not go for Jet Punch, but a Wave Crash is definitely enough to finish that off solidly, meaning that Alberto will be bringing this into a Game 3.
He really did learn from OCIC. Now this time the Palafin on his side carrying the team to victory in Game 2.
Listen, I would absolutely put a Palafin on my side for anything, and Palafin is just such a cool Pokemon. I really like the changes that Alberto made. I think that it was a really good choice on his part to bring the Palafin, and also, like you said, having Flip Turn is kind of a little bit of a cheeky turn 1 opportunity to allow Klefki to come back in, and after hard swapping it out, I think it worked out pretty well in his favor. He staggered his screens a lot better. I don't think he was as worried about speed control either, which was kind of a nice thing to see.
Yeah, I thought it was sort of neat too. I think he managed the Klefki's health really well too, where eventually it would have knocked out the Arcanine. The Arcanine, deciding it was better to be knocked out than to faint, and just knocked itself out instead. But like he had it on the field exactly the right time, where he got screens up efficiently. He could have done it 1 turn faster if he'd decided to predict he wasn't going to be faked out, but why do that? And then it was a very good low risk play just to eat the burn there, where there was no chance of that mattering by the time that Palafin went back out there. So why not use the item, right? You're gonna be holding it either way, whether you consume it or not.
Arcanine went for the "you can't fire me, I quit." I think is truly the phrase that we wanted to go for. Do you think Nishant wants to bring their Palafin? Because I think that might be a Game 3 adjustment if you're feeling bold enough to make it. I could also see a Mungus possibly coming. You still then have to deal with the threat of the Volcarona and Roaring Moon. I think is probably too much to ignore.
Yeah, I think so too. I think another interesting element of this too, right, is we're still not seeing Garchomp from Alberto, which I wouldn't be shocked if we see this game, but I think having shown Palafin in Game 2 is really interesting, where you now have to kind of be concerned about that. The Arcanine was such an important Pokemon in Game 1, and it's just very difficult for it to play against Lum Palafin kind of at all, right? Where not usually the item you have to worry about there. Usually well, I got the burn and intimidated it. That's a pretty good trade. I got the Lumberry and then got knocked out. Less good. You
feel like you have to devote an entire turn to getting the Lumberry, and that never feels great, right? Because then you're kind of stuck in saying, all right, that's 1 turn I was wasn't able to do damage on a Pokemon that wants to just switch in and out and all around. Though game 3, Iron Hands and Arcanine once again for Nishant. No change here. Klefki, Volcarona though. Alberto bringing Klefki with 3 different partners.
Hey, Klefki can dance with anybody. It's the interesting path
Can
here.
definitely quiver dance with anybody.
It's true. Yeah. It's you know the all right.
It took you a second.
We got there. These players are playing so quickly, by the way. I didn't comment on this before, but man, like this is they both know exactly what they want to do every game.
Yeah, Garchomp switches in for Klefki. Once again, no screens here. Volcarona clicking Protect, probably a much safer fake out target because you don't want to let that get a Quiver Dance up early. Fake out though into the Garchomp. Man, that still does a lot of damage for a fake out, but you're still taking some rough skin in retaliation there from the Garchomp. Arcanine Snarl does not hit into the one Pokemon that I think it really would have loved to go into with that Protect. Does hit down into the Garchomp, just does a small, tiny amount of chip damage.
Yeah, sort of an awkward position to be in here where like you would love to use Earthquake as the Garchomp here, but a little dangerous to actually do that given the state of the game and the general absence of flying types on Alberto's team. You know, if he brought Corviknight, I guess there's the option of switching that in here, although even if he has it, you kind of don't want to do that, right? Because you want to keep it for later, and we see he does not have it. So interesting how he plays this. You know, this is the Choice Scarf Garchomp. It's a little different than the Garchomp we saw before, which, you know, we could at least use the Stomping Tantrum instead, but Arcanine predictably getting out of here.
Yeah, Arcanine definitely wants to come back in later, but Amoonguss is the Pokemon that Nishant has brought as a trade, and that is a little bit of a different switch up here. Volcarona going to switch out for Alberto, instead going to be bringing in that Klefki. Klefki not going to be able to get in for free this time. They end up taking some damage from its partner Pokemon, but Garchomp instead clicking Rock Slide down into both of the Pokemon on the other side of the field. No flinch though. Wild Charge targets down into that Klefki. That's a super safe move because you have to imagine that if Alberto was going to switch anything, it would be into something that doesn't take Earthquake damage, and that feels like a free Wild Charge.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, he doesn't really end up hitting, but you see what he's fishing for right there. I think it's a really clever move, and I do think it's still reasonably punishable, right? I mean, like, Garchomp is now locked into Rock Slide, which is, I mean, you know, with the Rock Slide, there's a way. Who knows? You know, maybe it'll flinch both of these Pokemon for 7 turns, and Alberto's going to be a genius. But as it stands, Garchomp's going to really struggle to do a whole lot, most likely.
Reflect from this Klefki. Once again, Rock Slide from the Garchomp. It is Scarfed. It is going to be moving first. Flinch on the Iron Hands. And the Amoonguss does not get flinched, but it does get a Pollen Puff Off onto its partner Pokemon. Is going to restore that back up to full. But this is where things get a little frustrating if you're Nishant.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly going to be difficult to stop these screens while this is happening, but you know, at the very least, both these Pokemon can heal, right? You know, Amoonguss can heal up its friends, then switch out and heal itself. So these Rock Slides not doing a whole lot of anything, assuming eventually the offensive Pokemon on Nishant's side of the field actually is able to attack. But yeah, I mean, free screens are never something you're going to complain about as the Klefki player.
Yeah, Light Screen going to come up this turn as well. Once again, Rock Slide from this Garchomp. It is locked into it this turn, so I will be saying that every single consecutive turn until it is off of the field. Amoonguss eating that Citrus Berry as well. Going to regain a good chunk of its HP there. Is another Iron Hands flinch. Actually, Amoonguss does get the Spore off, and that is probably Nishant's best way to start putting some damage down.
Yeah, I get it. You know, I think I too would have had about enough of that. Yeah, put that to sleep. No more Rock Slides. You know, crucially, too, with it being so quick, with that Choice Scarf does not get a turn of sleep there. So the next turn that Garchomp is in the field, it will not have a chance to wake up. And that will give a nice window here for Nishant to reposition his board.
Yeah, Iron Hands is going to switch out, you know, not going to want to take something like some big damage. But now Fluttermane can come in here. It can get some super effective damage off, especially if Alberto has decided that they want to put their Terrestrialization somewhere else. Thunder Wave from the Klefki into the Amoonguss does put it into Paralysis, so it may have a 25% chance to not get any attacks off. Garchomp will take its first turn of sleep. Another Spore from the Amoonguss down onto the Klefki. The Klefki is not a Pokemon I think you're really all that worried about right now if you're Nishant, because it's already done exactly what it wanted to do.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I guess having a sleep, you know, Nishant's certainly not going to be complaining about that, but it really just creates the window for Amoonguss now switch out safely, get that regenerative boost, and Nishant can send out one of their other Pokemon to actually accomplish something here.
Yeah, Arcanine coming in will get an Intimidate off, most importantly. Not going to have that redirected since Corviknight is not in this game at all because of, you know, what we know behind the screen here. Klefki will take that turn to sleep, showing that it went for something probably Prankster related because it did go first. Garchomp also stays asleep for this turn. It does have a better chance to wake up, but Moonblast probably going to be lights out for that Garchomp, and it does get knocked out right there.
yeah, some really nice positioning by Nishant. They don't really expose themselves to any risk, little choice but to allow the screens given how things played out, but still pick up a safe knockout, switch out 2 Pokemon pretty safely, and not a bad situation to be in here, right? Moonblast probably not the ideal the move to be locked into, as Volcarona potentially threatens some Quiver Dances, but Arcanine being out there is the right matchup.
Yeah, Fluttermane switching out here, sending in the Iron Hands for Nishant, and that at least allows, I think, for maybe a fake out on the next turn if you went for a Quiver Dance this turn. Klefki actually waking up here this turn, getting a pretty fast wake up, Thunder Wave down into that Arcanine, just trying to once again just slow these Pokemon down. If you can get a full paralysis, it would be absolutely huge as well. Quiver Dance from the Volcarona, a pretty comfortable setup at this point in time. Special attack, special defense, and speed boost will allow you to maybe go for some big Giga Drains or some Flamethrowers later on down the line, but Snarl from the Arcanine does help get rid of that special attack boost.
Yeah, I mean, that's all that really matters there. I mean, very technically doing damage, but the important thing here is just not to let Volcarona get carried away. The net result of that turn is really just the speed boost in Volcarona and the Thunder Wave onto Arcanine. It's, I think, there's about 7 damage on Klefki and 0 on Volcarona. Arcanine's doing its best out here, but with a level of boosted special defense on Volcarona now and the light screen, it's tough.
Fake out into the Klefki this turn, though, not into that Volcarona. Volcarona going for another Quiver Dance here, maybe trying to possibly predict something like a Protect and just kind of a safe Protect here instead of taking fake out damage, but a little bit of a strong move here on the Volcarona side. But Snarl, once again, you can just, I think if you're Nishant, all you have to do is continue to click Snarl until pretty much the end of the game. You don't know what's in the back, but you can probably make a good guess.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And, it's like, the danger too, I guess, is that the turn you do get fully paralyzed, which maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. It's a 1 in 4 chance, but allowing that free Quiver Dance to Volcarona, if it happens, it likely would have turned on the offense. It's kind of difficult to do that now, right? Where I think Arcanine has managed to get enough Snarls off where now there's actually damage being threatened on that side, but we do see another Quiver Dance.
Another Quiver Dance, also meaning that this will be a Dazzling Gleam from the Klefki, as that did not end up happening first because it, no real option to prankster anything here. Dazzling Gleam, it's just little chip damage. We saw this Klefki do so much damage in OCIC, but not really matching up to that now. Wild Charge critical hit into that Volcarona, absolutely huge damage. Does get the Flame Body burn, so if you go for something like a Giga Drain, you may be able to get a lot of that HP back up, and that may be your best opportunity. But no, Flare Blitz, a double target down into that Volcarona. It's enough to get the knockout, and all of that setup for naught.
Yeah, I guess we would have seen the opposite result, right? It wasn't just continuing to Quiver Dance until the paralysis happened, and instead it was continuing to boost stats without dealing any damage, and then doing no damage because of the knockout the other way. You even thought the critical hit, so that would have been a lot of incoming damage, but the critical hit's pretty devastating for Alberto's odds of winning this one.
Yeah, Roaring Moon does switch in. You still have the option to Terrastalize here, and we've seen that Terrastalization every single turn. You know that the Arcanine is paralyzed, so it's not going to be moving as fast. Iron Hands is burnt, so it's not going to be doing as much damage with a Wild Charge. If you do Terrastalize here, you can continue to click Dazzling Gleam, but Arcanine is going to switch out. It is most importantly useful for its Intimidate, and Amoonguss can come in here and probably freely click something like Spore.
Yeah, and also critical too. I mean, the Rage Powder option is pretty scary. Roaring Moon's a Pokemon's doing a bunch of single target damage, and there's so many more resources now left on Nishant's side of the field that they can kind of just slowly grind this one out, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the matter of, do you click Rage Powder? Do you, if you're Alberto, do you try and target down into the Iron Hands? Does the Iron Hands not feel as bad anymore? But Dragon Dance, Alberto's going for setup. He knows that he needs to get this big damage off, especially if you have the threat of an Arcanine coming back in later on in the game. Klefki clicking Dazzling Gleam, just continuing to do little itty bits of chip damage every single turn, and that's really all it can do. Close combat from the Iron Hands into the Roaring Moon. It handles that very, very comfortably. I think this Klefki, its best opportunity is to try and get some full paralysis here.
Yeah, I mean, it's doing all it can. The Spore the other way would be pretty devastating, but what will also be devastating is an Acrobatics on that Amoonguss at this point if it's able to happen. And Klefki's getting a little damage dealt. It's not like impressing us too much on the offensive front, but with the burn on that Iron Hands from the Flame Body ability of the Volcarona, that and the Dazzling Gleams would add up, and yeah, Iron Hands ends up having to switch off the field here.
Yeah, Klefki's still hanging around too, because now that Reflect is up, it can just easily click Reflect again. Arcanine's Intimidate coming down will at least help mitigate some of the boosting there from that Dragon Dance, at least at this point too. It looks like Nishant actually going for a Terrastalization of their own, and this is a really clever one, a very defensive one. Terra Water Amoonguss, this is meaning that you are not going to be taking that super effective damage from that Acrobatics. It's still going to hit like a train. It's not a weak move by any means. Klefki's Reflect as well, meaning that this Arcanine may not be able to do as much damage, helps to mitigate a lot of this pressure. But Roaring Moon's acrobatics down into the Amoonguss, it is not enough to get that knockout, but maybe on the next turn. But no, the Spore this turn, no full paralysis, which is, I think, what Alberto needed.
Yeah, great terrestrialization there. The game looks very different if that's a knockout and there's no Spore coming down here. Instead, now Arcanine probably threatening a knockout in this Klefki. Amoonguss maybe can switch back out, start getting Iron Hands back in to threaten more damage on this Roaring Moon. And the game's still close, and a quick wake-up could still make this interesting. But looking like Nishant was able to just barely get enough control of this one.
Fluttermane switching in. Alberto going to once again be clicking another screen, but first the Protect from the Amoonguss. The Klefki here does get a pretty free light screen at this point. You know, the Protect from the Amoonguss feels a little interesting to me. I wonder if there were any other options that it could go for, maybe something like a side Pollen Puff if it wanted to, but also maybe just not a whole lot to go for this turn when you know you have a guaranteed sleep turn.
Yeah, I mean, certainly wasn't in a lot of danger. I mean, not gaining a lot of momentum that turn, but you know, at least we do get an offensive Pokemon out on that side of the field now, going to be threatening a lot of damage onto this Roaring Moon. And this is the reason why, I guess, opting to sacrifice the Amoonguss with the Rage Powder, ensuring that there's no chance of Fluttermane taking a single target attack this turn. Yeah,
and you force that Thunder Wave back down into the Amoonguss, who is already paralyzed, so you keep that pressure off of the Fluttermane. Roaring Moon, though, going to stay asleep, going to be taking a Moon Blast. That might be enough to get that knockout. I'm not sure with the chip damage, but that Reflect is probably going to be huge, and you're going to have to worry again about a Thunder Wave. So you have to now hope, if you are Alberto, Rage Powder fails, full paralysis, you get the full paralysis onto the Fluttermane, and then you can wake up and get an Acrobatics.
Yeah, it's there is a way, and we're kind of in a situation now too, right? It's almost become important to attack with Klefki. You know, there's a world where Dazzling Gleam wears this Amoonguss down enough that, you know, Roaring Moon can maybe get like one swing in another spot with help from a full paralysis, and then Protect to avoid having to waste an attack. Here's step one. It's a Protect, though.
Wake Up, Protect. Hey, you'll take those. I think you'll take those almost any day of the week, right? Amoonguss clicking Rage Powder once again. Alberto going to have to see exactly what he targeted down with, but that Moonblast is showing that it's going to be a Dazzling Gleam, right? So that the Moonblast into the Roaring Moon, not going to do any damage. This Dazzling Gleam, once again, just continuing to whittle down a little bit of damage here and there. You might just, I don't know what you end up doing here.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real little bit where that is not going to turn into a knockout fast enough where like, yeah, he needs a fully paralyzed, and that's not what we see.
No full paralysis here, just going for an Acrobatics down into that Rage Powdered Amoonguss. Does get the knockout here, meaning you're once again clicking Dazzling Gleam with this Klefki, which means you're not clicking Thunder Wave, which means that you're not possibly getting a 25% chance of a full paralysis onto that Fluttermane, which is the end goal that you need to go for. But Moonblast down into the Roaring Moon, it's enough for that knockout. And I don't know if this is the little Klefki that could, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, the Klefki is going to have to survive an awful long time. I don't know if I see it in the cards in this one. A really well-played third game so far. Both sides just slugging back and forth, but it's going to take an awful lot of Dazzling Gleams to deal with that much HP.
I think here's the thing, right? You have full paralysis on Arcanine. You can go for a Thunder Wave here onto the Fluttermane, and I think if you're Alberto and you really want this win and you really want to grind it out, which it looks like he's not going to be doing for us on stream, which I appreciate because it's hard to commentate sometimes over something that is 75% not likely to happen. But no, Nishant going to be moving on to 6-1, one step closer to playing in that Day 2 Swiss, looking pretty good for them right now. Alberto, there's still a chance. He just has to, you know, win, I think, a couple more games.
Yeah, I think that was a really intricate, well-played set,
yes.
Right? And we've seen a surprising amount of games so far today, right? Where we've got a player who's had some incredible tournament results this year, and they aren't able to pull it off on stream. You know, we're really seeing how strong the player base is right now, where even the best players are showing, you know, it's tough out there.
It is, the player density is, it's incredible. The talent is so incredibly stacked. I feel like at every single regional, and it's not even you can say, oh, I'm going to play against insert big name player here. Oh, I'm playing against this person who it's their first tournament, but then they end up going undefeated. It's like no round is safe. No opponent is safe.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good lesson for a lot of people. I mean, you need to take every opponent seriously. I mean, this one certainly was. I think both sides played really well. You know, at this point in the tournament, you know that your opponents are very good. But I thought it was really interesting the way this one played out, where I thought Nishant, they closed both of the wins really cleverly.
Yes.
Where, like, I think it was a somewhat complicated endgame state both times, and there's a bunch of options for how they could have chosen to try to end those games. And I think the way that they did it was really smart, right? Where it would have taken, you know, something pretty outrageous for either of those games to flip this the wrong way. I think it's really easy to kind of get ahead, like know that you're ahead and kind of like try to close it out too quick and then kind of open the door for, it's still improbable, but less improbable bad scenario to happen against you. The odds were stacked really nicely in this one.
Yeah, I think for Nishant, what they did incredibly well was they understood the techs on Alberto's team and were still able to play around them. Because when you're dealing with a team that is truly just chock full of tools, you know, keys and tools, all of that good stuff. When you're playing against a team that is just so full of a lot of different tech options, you have to be patient. There's a lot of planning. I like the game plans. Even Alberto's game 2, I thought was really, really well played by him. You know, Palafin, I think, was a really cool Pokemon, but I definitely understand the reason you may not have wanted to bring it in game 3, especially if you assumed for an overcorrection. But that made the Amoonguss so much safer, I think, to just kind of sit in there. You didn't have to worry about clicking Spore into that Palafin. You didn't have to worry too much about all the switching, but there was a lot of switching on both sides of the field, and I think Nishant was very cognizant of where their Arcanine was at all times in those games, and that paid off very well for them.
Yeah, like, again, you know, kind of looking back at that first game, you know, I thought Alberto did such a good job of playing against the Arcanine. It's like kind of still didn't matter, right? Where they just didn't allow Alberto to have any real window to get back into that game. I'm also will be curious to hear what they were thinking with the Pokemon selection in game 3, because I'm a little curious if Alberto didn't kind of set himself up a little bit there. Like, I think by winning game 2, by highlighting Palafin so prominently, it sort of encourages the Amoonguss pick that then undoes him in game 3. Because, yeah, I mean, I think that's some of the solution to Volumberry, right? It's like, well, what happened in game 2 was the Will-O-Wisp hit, and then it was a problem because he never got a chance to activate the second status effect. Perhaps in game 3, even if the Palafin was there, like, oh, well, you know, this time I have Spore ready to take advantage of the Lumberry being missing, and then, you know, we get to the same place in a different way.
Yeah, I think, you know, like you said, there's going to be a lot of interesting thoughts from both of those players. Speaking of which, we have an interview ready in Bidoo's Hangout with Gabby and Nishant. Take it away.
I'm not too high. All right.
Hello, everybody. I am here with Nishant, who just won an incredible match on stream against Alberto. How does it feel?
It feels great. But before I get started, do you want a donut?
Yeah, sure.
Amazing.
All right.
I've been handing them out all day. It feels really good. It was a very scary set for sure. He played super, super well. And yeah, it feels really great to come out on top.
I know. I mean, talk about scary sets. You know, one thing that I really love about Alberto's team is that there are so many outs that you have to manage, and it really did feel like it came down to the wire at the end of that game 3. Like,
oh, yeah.
What was your strategy as soon as you started seeing those thunder waves start coming out?
My strategy was just play the game.
Yeah.
If I get parried, I get parried. I really wanted to focus on bulk this game, so I knew that I had a Amoonguss to help pick up the pieces, so even if I lost a turn or two, I felt like I was in a position to kind of come back from that.
Yeah, and I think matching the bulk was also a really smart call, because
Yeah.
I did notice that Alberto's team, I mean, we saw it do well in Oceania, obviously, and it just, that game 1 against you was just like, he's not doing damage, but it's just so bulky, you know?
Oh, game 1 was scary. My game plan was just burn things and then figure it out later. And so I think I was able to put myself in really strong positions. So yeah, I think I had a game plan going in. I was saying, hey, if you're gonna set up screens, that's fine. You're not doing a lot of damage. Let's try and whittle away those turns to set up where they're gone and I can do a lot of damage back.
Yeah, I have clearly the right game plan for sure. How has the team felt throughout the day for you? Has it been a good fit? Do you feel like there's anything you kind of wish you could have changed?
I love it. I have really been struggling to find a team, especially for Series 2. I've really been struggling with the past couple regionals, so to be on stream was like a dream come true. To win on stream was like even better. And so I went back to my roots of like playing balance, playing comfort, and I found a team.
Yeah, clearly balance and comfort. Who has been the MVP on the team for you so far?
Fluttermane.
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 All right.
It has done exactly what it's needed to do. It's lived when it's needed to live. It's KO'd when it's needed to KO. And it looks really cute. I think it's just a fun little Pokemon to have around.
For sure, for sure. So we don't have too much time, so
Yeah.
I do want to ask, you know, are there anybody at home that you want to give a shout out to? Anybody you want to say hello to?
Way too many people. I'm going to give a couple. I'm going to give one definitely to the Criers, one to Chalky for sure, Luffy's Lair, and then I'll give one to Aaron Trailer and Santino just for being there for me like through all the rough patches. So appreciate all of you. Also my Pokemon friend group, I'm gonna send some more later, but I'm not thinking super straight right now.
We actually do have a bit more time than I thought.
Oh,
so
cool.
I checked the matches before we went up, and you were
Yes.
one of the last 2 remaining. So
Oh, that's exciting.
yeah, I mean, I kind of want to talk to you in particular because, you know, we've had an opportunity to sort of hang out offline,
Yes.
as people do.
That is fair.
And I know that you are one of the newer players in the New England region.
Yeah.
I can't remember when you started playing, but I feel like this is your first year really kind of like going for it.
Yeah, so I started playing like May 2021.
Oh, wow. Okay. So,
Yeah.
yeah, still pretty recent.
Yeah, so Secaucus last year was my first regional, then I did NAIC, and then I've done like all of the United States ones so far. So this has really kind of been the season where I'm like picking up some steam.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, you mentioned you went, what was it, 3-something in Knoxville?
3 and 6.
Yeah.
It was a bad time.
2, 6, and 1.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's, what did you do to sort of address those? I mean, everybody has a bad tournament, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've been there, you've been there, I'm sure Fuecoco has also been there.
Sorry, Fuecoco.
Sorry, Fuecoco. But, you know, knowing that you have an event coming up in a couple weeks and knowing that you might not have time to maybe change the team, or how do you sort of, you know, I guess leave things where they are and come into an event with a fresh mindset?
I've prepped really different for this than every other event.
Really?
Yeah,
All right.
normally I prep like hours upon hours, I flowchart everything, but here I was like, you know what? I have a team, I played like 10 games with it, I felt good enough with it, and I was like, I'm gonna focus on me. I really needed that. I think I was just getting too in my head.
Of course.
And I was able to bounce back, so that's been really great.
Yeah, and I think that's also where having a good group of friends coming in as well. I mean,
So,
I know
yeah.
Chalky definitely hears plenty of my problems and helps me sort through them. So
Every time I text Chalky, I'm like, I'm so sorry that you have to deal with me, but I'm very thankful for his friendship.
me too, me too. And I guess, you know, obviously there are still a couple of matches left for today. You mentioned that you've been to every U.S. regional. I'm assuming that means you're going to Charlotte in a couple weeks.
I am not, which makes me sad.
The combo breaker.
I was so excited for Charlotte. I like texted friends that were there, and I was like, wait, can't make it. It's fine though. We do what we can. We accept
of course.
the world. Yeah, we just accept it. Like, I'm happy with the things that are happening instead. So I'm rooting for everyone that's going to be there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you'd change up the team, but I guess I'll just ask you as a hypothetical thing to wrap things up. If you had another Series 2 or Regulation B tournament, would you make changes to this team based off what you've seen today?
I don't think so. I
Fair
think
enough.
maybe making Fluttermane a little bit faster, but even then, I wouldn't sacrifice the bulk, so I think it's really sort of been what I needed it to be.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nishant, for taking the time to talk with me and for the snack. I'm going to go enjoy this off stream.